Right, today's project is to fit this 305 big bore kit to the XL250 engine. As you can see, the difference between the 250 piston and the 305 quite considerable. So hopefully that should bring us a little boost in performance. So I'll start by getting the rings fitted to the piston, and then I'll be fitting the piston onto the conrod. I'll take it from there. Right, that's the piston installed on the conrod, and the rings are in place as well. So now I've got to lower the barrel, complete with its fresh new base gasket. I've got to lower that carefully over the rings and over the cam chain tensioner and feed the cam chain through all at the same time. No easy task. You can see, when compared with the old 250 piston, you can see how much bigger the 305 is. So you can see why that's considered a decent performance upgrade. I've had one together before, and it was okay, but it wasn't quite right. So hopefully this time around I've got it just right. So I've got to get prepared now by trying to keep the piston in an upright position, possibly with a bit of rag around it, and then a bit of wire to hold up the chain, and that way feeding the barrel on should be a bit easier. So let's see how we get on. Right, the barrel's on. I'm just going to finish off tapping it down with this rubber mallet so it locates on the dowels. You can actually hear it as it seats properly. You can actually hear the sound change slightly. Right, that's the barrel down. Got the cam chain on the piece of wire, and the cam chain tensioner. Cam chain tensioner then gets bolted to the barrel, but not just yet. So my next step will be to fit the new copper head gasket. I made a copper head gasket because you can't actually, it's very difficult to find a head gasket for a 305 on the S engine. You can get the gasket sets for the earlier motorsport XL250s, but very rare to find them for the S model. So I had to use a standard 250 head gasket and use it as a pattern. And I made a 305 with obviously the larger bore out of copper. I've annealed it, so it should be nice and pliable, nice and soft. But before I bolt it all down, I'm going to spray it with this VHT copper gasket cement, they call it, designed for head gaskets and things like that. But you've got to spray it on and then let it dry, and use it after about 5 minutes. So I'll do a few other checks, make sure it turns over nicely before I start to go down this route. I like to make sure it's the engine is turning over nicely and the pistons rising up and down without any problems. Just a quick shot of the piston rising and falling. Everything seems to be nice and smooth there. Top of the stroke pad. Right, there you can see the copper gasket is in place. I sprayed it with the copper gasket cement spray. The dowels are all in place. There's particularly the one with the O-ring on it for the oil way. So now all I have to do is try and lower the head without scuffing up the new copper gasket. So I'll feed my bit of wire through, which keeps the chain out of the way. Something's not right. There we go. Bollocks. Well, I've dropped the cam chain down the tunnel, but I think I'll be able to hook that back out. There we go. Right, I'll just secure that down there with a piece of wire. Right, so that's the head lowered down. I'll just use the mallet again just to make sure that's down on the dowels. Yep, looks okay. So I can now just pop in the head bolts. It's at this point I'm always worried that I've missed something. I keep looking down on the bench, just making sure that everything is in place. Yeah, I think I'm okay. The last thing you want to be doing is discovering after you've torqued the head up that you've left off a circlip or something for the gudgeon pin, something like that. The cam chain tensioner gets secured, and then the chain gets tensioned obviously after the head has been torqued down. But I want to get the head bolted down as quickly as possible now, just to make sure that the gasket is doing its job, because the spray, they recommend on the back that after you've sprayed you wait 5 minutes or until the film becomes tacky, which it was, apply gasket to surface and tighten as soon as possible and within 2 hours. So as soon as possible and within 2 hours gives you gives you quite a leeway, but I'm going to go along the as soon as possible route. So yeah, so I'll just I'll tighten these bolts down, and then I'll see about getting the camshaft in. So I'll do that now. Now comes the bit where I have to torque the head bolts down. So I've got my torque wrench, and the setting is 22 to 26 foot-pounds. You have to tighten them in a diagonal fashion always worried at this point that you're going to strip one of the bolts if you over torque it. It's very tempting to up it a little bit just to be on the safe side, but not really recommended, because you can distort the head, and you can of course strip the thread out of the top crankcase. They all seem okay. Right, and then there's a nut underneath the front here. There's a nut under the engine here, under the cylinder head there, and there's another one at the back which go onto studs, which are in the head, and they pass down through the through holes in the barrel, so they've got to be done up. They're done up 16 to 20 foot-pounds, but you can't really get a torque wrench in there because of the position. I don't know if you can see. Oh, I'll show you. That's that one there. That's that nut at the back, and there's another one at the front. At this angle, you can actually see the copper head gasket. So you, all you can really do with them is do them up with a spanner. And hopefully you can judge 16 to 20 foot-pounds. So I tend to use my my arm torque wrench. Click. I think it's about right. And then the one at the front underneath here. Click. Right. Right, that's the head on, torque down. So now all I have to do is put the camshaft in and time the engine up. And to do that, we have to look down the holes, the side of the engine here, the flywheel cover, which has got the marks on it, which enable us to get the thing timed up. So I'll do that now. Right, we're getting towards the final bit now, the timing of the engine. When you look through the side casing here onto the flywheel, there's a T mark on the actual flywheel itself, which you look through this hole here. Use a socket to rotate the crankshaft until that T mark comes into line. And according to the manual, it's all very simple. You loop the cable over the camshaft sprocket, and you make sure there's two marks on the actual sprocket itself here, and you line them up flat with the surface of the head here. It all sounds very simple in the manual, but when it comes to actually doing it, it's really fiddly, and I'm sure some people will have their own method of doing it, and I've got mine. But it's not as simple as I make out. For a start, you have to try and take the tension off the cam chain, and the only way to do that is to press against the cam chain tensioner. In doing so, part of it pops up here. You have to lock it in that position. I use a pair of mole grips. According to the manual, there's a hole that you can put a pin through, which keeps it in the locked off position. But I don't have that here, so So I've always had to put a screwdriver in there, push against the tensioner, pops this little lug here, grip it with the mole grips, it keeps it in that position until you can fiddle around with getting the cam chain onto the sprocket and getting it lined up. I've got one bolt in. There's a bolt here which you do up on one side of the sprocket, and then basically you rotate the whole thing 180 degrees, and then you can line up the other one. I won't do it up too tight in case there's a small amount of. I think in theory, I think I can probably no. I'll leave it as it is. I'll leave the mole grips as they are. So I'll rotate it anti-clockwise until the other hole comes into line. Before you, when you place the camshaft in position, the lobes have to. There, see, that's not quite line. I knew there was a reason why I left one of the bolts slightly loose. Yeah, the camshaft lobes, when you initially start off at top dead center, which is what the T mark indicates, is the lobes should be in the what do they call it? The 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock position. That's how I remember it. So the lobes pointing down the way, not up the way. So you can get the other bolt done up. So that's done up. Then I can go back to the earlier position. Back to 180 degrees, and then tighten that one up, and then again back 180 degrees. And knit this one up as well. Right, so now I think I can release the chain. There's a little spring-loaded plunger. Once you press that, then in theory the chain should be tight and you're all timed up. So obviously, to make sure. Right, I've put a thin film of RTV on this on the rocker box surface there on the mating surfaces. You have to make sure it's nice and clean and dry. Wipe it with thinners or gun wash before applying it. I've just put it on the one side. You don't need to do it on both. And remember, it only needs to be a thin film. You don't want great oozing bits of silicone sealant coming out. Make sure that where the camshaft sits, you've got a little bit of oil there. Some of you may notice that this is it's not a totally original XL250 engine. Some parts are XL, some parts are RS250, but the RS was slightly later, and in my opinion the RS 250 RS engine was slightly better quality than the XL. Certain component parts seem to be better built, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, so make sure everything looks good before it goes on. There's a couple of dowels that line up. Get the trusty rubber mallet. There's the automatic decompression lever. You can tell that the rocker box on this and the cylinder head is off an RS250, because the RS has a rev counter. Of course, the XLs don't. I think the fact that it's all painted black is a bit of a giveaway as well. But I've sprayed certain bits myself. Right, so that's the rocker box on. I've got to put all the bolts in there, and then turn it over, spin it over again, make sure the valves and everything are operating nicely, and you're not getting any contact with the top of the piston. So right, I'll put these bolts in now. Right, nearly finished. All the bolts done up for the rocker box. Don't forget, 3 of these bolts have to have copper washers. So these 2 here and that one there. So, and also don't forget that there's 2 that go inside the tappet inspection covers, which you can't see with them on there. A number of times I've taken all the bolts out, haven't for some reason removed these, and then wonder why I can't get the thing off. And oh yes, of course, there's the 2 in there, so you've got to take them off. Remember, and also you don't need to tighten these down that much. It's literally 7 to 10 foot-pounds, and that's not a lot. So they're only 6mm. The number of heads I've seen which have had the thread stripped out because people have been a bit enthusiastic. I've got one engine where most of these have been turned into 8mm bolts, where they've actually drilled the head out, tapped it with an 8mm thread, and put 8mm bolts in. That's okay. The engine's running and everything, but it just means that that head is now only ever going to be of any use if you use 8mm bolts. Of course, the rocker box would have been drilled accordingly, you know. So anyway, so all there is now is just to put these tappet covers. While you're in the position, now you do the valve clearance, obviously, which I've already done. So now it's a case of fit these. I've got some nice stainless steel bolts for these. So again, there's no ring in there, so you don't have to. You just nip them up. Again, you see you've got the O-ring there. And that's it. Got to put a spark plug in, but once everything's, oh yeah, I'm going to put these. This is obviously the inspection cover hole there. Its own little screw, large flat blade screw. I always, once it's back in the frame, I leave the spark plug out and then kick it over a few times to get the oil up to the top end of the engine before starting it up. So I leave the spark plug out anyway, because obviously the compression is easier without the plug in it, not with the increased compression. The 305 piston, because of the larger surface area, it increases the compression automatically, and so to try and kick it over with the spark plug in, you know, initially to get the oil up, it's obviously going to be easier without the plug in there, so I leave the plug out. But yeah, that's basically it. That's ready to go back in the frame. I've done all the other bits and pieces. The idea of this video was just to show the top end rebuild. I've already, you know, rebuilt the lower part of the engine previously, so this was just showing how to put the top end on. This happens to be a 305, which is my project, but obviously a 250, exactly the same. So the same principle. So over the weekend I will try and get this back in the frame, so I can start using it. But that's about it. Thanks for watching.